It began, as many great discoveries do, with pure accident. Picture a quiet stretch of North Carolina in the early 1800s. Thick forests, muddy creeks, and scattered farms owned by settlers who had no idea they were walking over hidden treasure. One summer afternoon in 1799, a young boy named Conrad Reed was fishing in a small creek on his family's farm. The sun glimmered on the water, and something bright caught his eye, a smooth, heavy yellow rock, unlike anything he had ever seen. He hauled it out, carried it home, and showed it to his father, John Reed. They admired it for its color and shine. But no one in that humble household had the slightest idea what it really was. For years, that strange rock sat near their door, serving as a makeshift doorstop, holding open the entrance to a modest cabin, a silent golden secret worth a small fortune. For nearly 3 years, neighbors and friends passed through the Reed house, walking right past that 17-pound gold nugget, never guessing its true nature. Imagine that the very first documented gold find in the United States, lying unnoticed in a North Carolina farmhouse, used simply to keep a door from swinging shut. It wasn't until 1802, when a local jeweler saw it and recognized it for what it truly was, that the Reeds realized they had been living with a treasure that could change their lives forever. The story spread fast. Whispers of gold in the Carolina hills began to ripple across the countryside, and what started as one boy's discovery would soon ignite something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. America's very first gold rush. Word spread through the Carolina countryside like wildfire. Farmers, blacksmiths, and townsfolk who had never even seen gold before began streaming toward Cabarrus County, clutching picks, shovels, and buckets. They came not with dreams of empire or conquest, but of survival, ordinary people, chasing an extraordinary promise. The Reeds, realizing the potential beneath their land, started mining operations on their own property. At first, they worked by hand, digging into the red Carolina clay and panning through the muddy creek beds. The gold they found glittered like something divine, shimmering under the southern sun. Soon, other families joined in, turning once quiet farmlands into buzzing camps filled with hope, sweat, and ambition. But this wasn't California. There were no sprawling boomtowns yet, no grand saloons or railroads, just small communities built on faith and rumor. The early miners relied on instinct and luck more than skill. Some struck small fortunes, pulling nuggets the size of walnuts from shallow streams. Others dug for weeks and found nothing but mud. Still, every success story fueled a growing fever, and the name Reed Gold Mine became legendary. People came from neighboring states, even from across the ocean, drawn by tales of a land where gold could be picked up by hand. The Reed family's accidental discovery had done more than reveal a treasure. It had awakened a nation's hunger for opportunity. In a time when America was still young, when money was scarce and survival was hard, that golden glow from the Carolina hills symbolized something far deeper than wealth. It represented possibility, a chance for anyone, even a struggling farmer, to rewrite his destiny with his own 2 hands. By the 1820s, the quiet hills of North Carolina were no longer just farmland. They had become the heart of a booming new industry. Dozens of small mines dotted the landscape, and streams once known only to fishermen now glimmered with the promise of gold. Entire families worked side by side, their hands calloused, their clothes caked in mud. Driven by the same dream that had started with the Reeds, makeshift mining towns sprang up almost overnight, clusters of wooden huts and rough tents where miners traded stories, tools, and dreams of striking it rich. The clinking of pickaxes and the murmur of running water filled the air. For the first time, America was witnessing the birth of a true gold economy. Banks began to appear, merchants thrived, and blacksmiths forged tools specifically for the miners. But with opportunity came greed. Partnerships were made and broken, fortunes were won and lost, and whispers of dishonesty began to creep through the camps. Many of the miners were illiterate farmers. They relied on merchants and brokers who often took advantage of them, buying gold at unfair prices. Yet despite the risks, more and more people came. Some abandoned entire farms and livelihoods to chase that glint in the dirt. And even though the Reed family had sparked this transformation, their own story was marked by betrayal. When John Reed sold his first large nugget to a local jeweler, he was paid only $3.50 for gold worth thousands. Still, John Reed pressed on. He transformed his farm into one of the first underground mining operations in America. tunneling deep into the earth in search of more treasure. His discovery had ignited not just a gold rush, but a movement that would spread across the nation, from the rolling Carolina hills to the distant frontiers of Georgia and eventually California. America's hunger for gold had only just begun, and it was about to reshape the very soul of the young nation. As the years rolled into the 1830s, the gold rush in North Carolina transformed from a local curiosity into a full-fledged enterprise. The once simple fields of Cabarrus and Rowan counties now teemed with hundreds of miners. Wooden sluices lined the creeks, and tunnels snaked beneath the earth. Supported by crude timbers and the determination of men who refused to give up, it wasn't long before professional mining companies began to take notice. Investors from the north and even from Europe poured money into the region, buying up land and turning what had once been family farms into organized mining operations. German engineers, skilled in metallurgy, arrived to teach Americans new refining techniques. For the first time, steam engines and water wheels powered machinery that could crush ore faster and deeper than any man with a shovel ever could. The landscape began to change. Forests cleared for timber, rivers diverted for mining, and hills scarred with the marks of ambition. Yet through it all, there was an unmistakable sense of pride. This was the first time many Americans had seen such wealth created from their own soil, their own hands. But as production grew, so did inequality. Wealthy investors controlled the best land, while poor farmers and laborers were pushed to the margins, forced to work for wages instead of dreams. The gold that glittered in their pans no longer felt like freedom. It became a reminder of how opportunity could slip through one's fingers. Still, people kept digging, because hope dies hard in the human heart. The idea that one strike, one lucky shovelful could change everything kept the rush alive. And in those muddy pits and echoing tunnels, America's future industrial spirit was quietly being born. By the 1840s, North Carolina's gold mines were producing more gold than anywhere else in the young nation. The U.S. Mint even established a branch in Charlotte to handle the sheer volume of raw gold flowing from the region, a sign that what began as a farmer's lucky find had grown into a cornerstone of America's expanding economy. Wagons heavy with or rolled through dusty roads, guarded by armed men wary of bandits. Banks and assay offices sprang up in small towns, their counters gleaming with freshly minted coins bearing the mark C. But prosperity didn't come without cost. The easy gold that once sparkled in riverbeds was long gone, replaced by deep, dangerous shafts that demanded courage and sometimes lives. Accidents became common. Tunnels collapsed, water flooded the mines, and miners toiled in darkness for days with nothing but candles and hope. For every man who struck gold, a dozen others went home empty-handed, their bodies broken and spirits tested. Yet the promise of gold never stopped calling. It whispered to men in their sleep, drew strangers from distant states, and inspired songs and legends that traveled faster than the wagons themselves. Then, in 1848, a single event would change everything. News broke of gold found in California. The Carolina miners, who had once been pioneers of America's first gold rush, suddenly found themselves overshadowed by a new, more dazzling frontier. People began abandoning their claims, selling equipment for pennies, and heading west. The once thriving mines grew silent, shafts filled with water, machines rusted in the rain, and the hills that had once echoed with ambition were reclaimed by time and trees. But though the spotlight shifted, the legacy of North Carolina's gold rush remained. It had taught Americans to dream big, to take risks, and to believe that fortune could be found in the most unexpected places. When word of California's discovery reached the East Coast, it spread like wildfire through taverns, newspapers, and whispers on the wind. Men who had once mined the Carolina hills packed their tools and set their sights on the far horizon. The promise of a new El Dorado was too powerful to resist. Wagon trains stretched for miles across the plains, filled with dreamers, fortune seekers, and entire families who believed that the next great miracle lay beyond the Rockies. But as the masses pushed west, the ghosts of North Carolina's gold fields lingered, silent witnesses to the nation's first great chase for riches. The Reed mine and others like it slowly faded into obscurity. The tunnels were abandoned, left to flood and collapse. The tools rusted where they were dropped, half buried in mud. And yet, beneath the surface, traces of gold still glimmered, as if the land itself refused to forget the fever it once inspired. Those who remained in the Carolinas told stories to their children of the days when men found fortune beneath their feet, when neighbors turned into rivals, and when a simple doorstop changed the course of history. Looking back, historians would later realize that the North Carolina gold rush was more than a brief frenzy. It was the spark that lit America's obsession with discovery, innovation, and expansion. It shaped the nation's identity long before California's hills echoed with pickaxes. And though few Americans today know the Reeds' name, their story was the first chapter in a saga that defined a century of exploration and ambition. The boy who picked up a shining rock from a creek had unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would drive millions to risk everything in search of gold, and perhaps a piece of the American dream itself. Decades later, as the 19th century drew toward its close, North Carolina's once-forgotten goldfields began to stir again. Not with the fever of fortune seekers, but with the quiet footsteps of historians, geologists, and treasure hunters who sought to uncover what had been lost to time. The Reed gold mine, long abandoned and overgrown, was rediscovered as a relic of America's earliest dreams. Old maps resurfaced, hand-drawn by miners who had vanished into history, and families told tales of hidden tunnels and buried caches of gold that were never claimed. Locals would walk the creeks and sometimes find small flakes glinting in the sunlight, faint echoes of the treasure that had built their towns. In the early 1900s, the mine was reopened for small-scale operations, and later it was preserved as a historic site, a living memory of the nation's first gold rush. Tourists who visit today can still walk through the same tunnels where John Reed once dug, feel the cool air of the earth that hid America's first fortune, and even pan for a few golden specks in the same stream where a boy's curiosity changed history. Yet standing there, it's easy to feel something deeper than nostalgia. The place carries a quiet power, as if it still remembers the hopes, struggles, and dreams that once filled these hills. What began with a 17-pound nugget and a curious boy had grown into a story that shaped generations. The Carolina gold rush had faded, but its spirit, the courage to look beyond the ordinary and believe in something extraordinary, had become a permanent part of the American soul. From the dusty creeks of Cabarrus County to the golden hills of California, the search for opportunity, for meaning, for something more, would define the country for centuries to come. Time has a way of softening even the brightest legends. But the story of America's first gold rush still gleams beneath the dust of history. When people hear of gold today, their minds leap to California, to the roaring camps of 1849. Two rivers choked with miners and fortunes made overnight. Yet few realize that decades before that frenzy, a young boy in North Carolina had already struck the first spark. The 17-pound doorstop wasn't just a rock, it was the symbol of a nation on the brink of change, a country learning to dream bigger than its borders and to dig deeper than its fears. In the quiet of Cabarrus County, where birdsong now fills the air once heavy with the clang of pickaxes, the land still holds whispers of that golden era. Visitors pause by the Reed family's humble cabin, some smiling at the thought of how close they came to missing history entirely. That doorstop, once ignored and trodden over, reminds us that sometimes the greatest discoveries lie right under our feet, unnoticed, unappreciated, waiting for the right pair of eyes to see their worth. The first gold rush didn't just shape the economy, it shaped the American spirit. It taught ordinary people that destiny could be found not in wealth alone, but in the courage to search for it. And though centuries have passed since Conrad Reed's shimmering find, his story still gleams in the collective memory of a nation built on curiosity, ambition, and hope. For somewhere out there, in another quiet creek or forgotten hillside, another story waits, just like his, to be found. As the sun dips low over the Carolina hills, it's easy to imagine that long-ago afternoon, a barefoot boy, a quiet stream, and a flash of gold that would ripple through generations. The Reed family could never have known that their discovery would become a symbol of everything Americans would one day chase: freedom, fortune, and the chance to change one's fate. That single moment in 1799 turned curiosity into legacy. It transformed a struggling farm into a legend. And it set the stage for every gold rush that followed, from Georgia's mountains to the rivers of California and beyond. Historians often call it the forgotten gold rush, but maybe that's what makes it so powerful. It wasn't about glory or headlines. It was about the wonder of discovery itself. There were no photographers, no crowded boom towns, just hard work, faith, and the belief that the Earth still held secrets worth uncovering. In that simplicity lies its magic. The Reeds were not treasure hunters or adventurers. They were ordinary people whose lives brushed against destiny in the most unexpected way. Today, as visitors stand by that same creek and listen to the gentle murmur of the water, they're standing on the birthplace of American ambition. The gold might be gone, but the spirit remains, a reminder that greatness often begins in the quiet moments we least expect. And for those who still feel the call of adventure, who still believe that discovery waits for the brave, the story of America's first gold rush shines like a beacon through time, eternal, humbling, and endlessly golden. 2 centuries later, the story of the 17-pound doorstop still feels almost impossible to strange, too perfect, too symbolic to be real. Yet it is. The Reed Gold Mine stands today not just as a museum, but as a monument to one of America's greatest lessons, that history often begins with an accident, and destiny can hide in the simplest of moments. Standing before the old cabin where the wooden door still swings open to the Carolina breeze, visitors can almost picture the Reed family inside, unaware that the rock propping their door open was worth more than their entire farm. What happened there wasn't just the discovery of gold, it was the birth of a mindset. America was still young, uncertain, and full of promise, and this event proved that extraordinary things could happen anywhere to anywhere. It taught the country to look inward, to believe that prosperity didn't have to come from kings or empires, but from the sweat and courage of ordinary people. Every pan dipped into a creek, every pick that struck the earth echoed that belief. And perhaps that's why this story endures. It's not just about wealth buried in the ground. It's about possibility buried in us all. Conrad Reed's simple curiosity sparked more than a gold rush. It ignited a dream that would fuel explorers, builders, and dreamers for generations to come. Long after the last nugget was pulled from the earth, the glow of that first discovery still lights the American imagination, proof that sometimes history's greatest treasures aren't found by those who search the hardest, but by those who dare to look a little closer.